Before I tell you the story, let me give you some background information. This happened a few years ago, when I was just 13. I live in a small town, and near my house about 3 blocks down the road, there's a large network of fields and woods where a lot of people like to go walking. I usually walk through the woods and across 3 fields to get home from school. It was winter, and obviously in the winter it gets dark very early. I was late back from school that day because I had detention for back-chatting the teacher in my math class. Anyways, I left school and it was already getting dark. The school I go to was about 1.5 miles away from the fields. Now, at that time, no one was around in those fields because it's dark, it's late, and it's kinda creepy in my opinion. I had this feeling, like some sort of subconscious. It was in the back of my mind in a way, and it was urging me not to go that way for some reason. Now, I've always been a very paranoid person, and at first I considered it, but it was quicker to get home if I walked through the fields and the trees. And yeah, it would save me about a good 40 minutes of walking along the pavements. So I got through the first 2 fields, and then there was the woods. It was very dark. Darker than any of the fields, obviously. I'm not ashamed to admit that I was afraid of the dark, and I still am, so I figured, hey, I'll walk fast and then the dark of those trees will be behind me and I won't have to do this ever again. I made my way into the trees, just walking fast. That's when things got scary. I just heard breathing at first, but I thought it was just me walking fast, as I'm not the most sporty of people, and I had just walked about 2.5 miles. I thought nothing of it until I heard a stick snap behind me. I knew I hadn't snapped it because it was from behind me and not from under me. I was internally freaking out at that point. Like, first breathing and then a twig snapping, and then footsteps? Distinct footsteps, too. They were heavier than my own, and they didn't keep well in time with mine. I'm guessing that's what the guy was trying to do, keep up with my footsteps. Well, that failed, and I took off into a run. Then, it was obvious, if it hadn't been before, that I was being followed when I heard a man's voice yell,
"Hey, kid!"
The only way I can describe what I felt then was my entire body went cold. I didn't even understand why, but it did, and I felt fear. A fear for my life. I feared for my life because I was being chased, and I was tired, so I couldn't keep this up for much longer. I did take a couple of glances back. The guy who was chasing me, from what I saw in brief glances, looked to be maybe in his older 40s. He was wearing a white, torn, dirty t-shirt and ripped shorts. I think he was also wearing sandals. As soon as I got to the edge of the trees, I didn't stop running. That guy chased me up until the edge of the train bridge that I had to walk over before he disappeared back into the trees. At this point, I was in tears, shaking and choking because I was so exhausted. I walked slowly after that, regaining my breath. The road I had to walk along connected to a grassy hill with a stream and a path with trees on the other side. The guy that had chased me, as I looked down, was standing by the small wooden bridge next to the stream, staring right at me, and I could tell he was grinning, even from how far away I was. There was something in his hand. I had seen it while he was running after me. It was silver, I think, and it glinted slightly. I think it was a switchblade. The way his face was contorted, it gives me chills just to think about it, let alone write about it. I eventually got home and ran to my mother in tears. I was barely able to tell her what had happened, but I said enough that she called the cops, and they searched the woods in the end and found nothing. I never saw the guy again until about a month later when I was walking to school with my friend. I went the long way, and there was no way I was ever walking through those woods again. I saw the guy. He was on the other side of the street, wearing old clothes, and his hair was dirty as hell. I kept my head down in fear of being recognized, and my friend asked me what the hell I was doing. I didn't tell her anything. I just said I was afraid of people with greasy hair having nits, and she just laughed. No need to scare her with my experiences with that guy. If this has taught me anything, it's to not walk alone in the woods in the dark, if you can help it at all. There's so many places people can hide in plain sight, especially in the dark, and you don't want to be caught alone like I was. I've recently moved to a new area due to my work, and it's far away from my family and friends. It's a weird little cul-de-sac area. I'm currently working on finding friends here, but I work Monday through Friday, and go to visit my parents on the weekends, so it's very hectic. I start at 7 a.m. and finish around half, 6 or 7 at night, so you can imagine that when I get home, I just want to eat and go to sleep. One day I come home and there's this old couple standing outside my door. They introduce themselves as the couple that lives directly opposite my house, and even hand me some home-cooked dinner. I say thank you and mention that I would invite them in, but there's still a lot of boxes everywhere, and I was quite embarrassed. I say I've moved to a new city on my own due to work. We small talk for a few more seconds, and I'm soon inside my house. I honestly put the food that they've given me in the fridge and think I'll just head straight to bed. In the morning I see the food that they've given me half eaten, and now in the sink. I must have been way too tired last night to remember eating this. The next night, I'm coming home from work, and I see the old lady waving at me from her kitchen window. I vaguely wave back and head inside, and nothing else really happens that night. The next night, I've had the shittiest day ever at work. I had to stay behind at work half an hour over due to an unhappy customer, and I had been craving my bed all day. I pull up outside my house, and I see the old couple standing outside their house. Are they keeping a record of what times I come home? I quickly ask myself. I'm honestly not in the mood for creepy-ass neighbors and making small talk again. I didn't know these people, and I don't know or understand why they're trying to socialize with me. Plus the day I've had, I'm not in the best of moods. I brace myself for the lame conversation that I'm about to have. Getting out of my car, I just wave generally in their direction and start fumbling in my purse to find the keys to my front door. "Excuse me, miss. Come over for some dinner? You look so tired," the old lady kept saying to me. I vaguely say something about me being too tired while generally getting annoyed. They wouldn't hold up. I open my door and I'm just about to step into it. The old guy comes across the road and even takes his hand on my arm, looks me dead in the eyes, and says something cheery about how his wife makes the best pie. Okay, whatever. I thought I'd go over for a cup of tea and some pie and nicely try to explain to them that I've had a shitty day and that I should be heading off. Hopefully they would take the hint. After shutting my door and stepping into their house, the old guy slams the door shut and locks it. They both proceed to tell me that around 7:30 they were looking out the windows for me to give me some chicken stir-fry that they had cooked and saved for me that night. They both clearly saw a man standing in my bedroom window and saw him walk downstairs. They could see him in the living room window walking into the kitchen. They said that they saw my car come into the cul-de-sac and saw him rush back past the living room window and obviously up the stairs. They had called the police and had tried to stop me from entering my house. Whoever it was clearly upstairs hiding somewhere. My heart fell. I felt dizzy. I glanced to my bedroom window expecting to see someone there, but nothing was there, just the curtains wide open. The police turned up shortly after, and I had to wait outside while they searched the house. In the crawl space, right outside my bedroom door, they found a homeless man curled up. He had been living there for the last 2-ish weeks, and according to him, he had snuck in when the moving packers had left the door open while struggling with something. He had been in the house and watching me while I had been asleep, and would come out while I was at work and away for the weekends. So, here's a bit of backstory first. I live in a neighborhood with lots of abandoned houses. There are about 12 houses in my neighborhood, and over 7 of them are abandoned. In one of the abandoned houses, there's a playground in the backyard that the old neighbors left behind. No, I was 12 at the time, and I knew in my brain I was a little too old to be playing at a playground made for 6-year-olds. But who can resist a nice swing set? I would spend some of my extra time over there, as it was summer, and I usually just played video games. The house is just past some woods you have to walk through, about a block away from my house. It was a normal day, and my mother said I should go get some fresh air outside because she was tired of watching me play video games. Being 12, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to go swing on the swing set because it was beautiful outside and the heat wasn't too hot but warm with a slight wind. I got on my shoes and walked down to the forest. As I was about to maybe take a few steps in, I heard a branch snap. Now, I hear these all the time from squirrels, so I don't think anything too much of it. I finally finish walking through the forest and reach the house. I open the back fence, lock it, and start to swing. I swing for about maybe 2 minutes, when I hear breathing. Now, I stop for a moment, trying to think of where the hell that's coming from. After about 30 seconds of stopping, I forced myself to think it was just me, as I was still going pretty high. I continue to swing for another 5 minutes, and I decide that I'm done for now. As soon as I sit up, I hear a,
Hey.
I look around for a moment and notice a man, about mid-30s, early 40s, with dirty gross black hair that's all over the place, a stained up sweatshirt, and underwear in the back cut out so I can see the outline of his butt. This guy was obviously homeless and had a crazy look in his eyes. Here I am, a 5'2", 95-pound kid with no strength, staring down a 6'2", 170-pound man. As tough as I could, I said, "What's up?" The guy stared at me and just smiled. After 15 seconds, which seemed like 40 minutes, he said,
Have room for one more?
I quickly said, I was actually just leaving, but it's all yours. The man opened the gate, walked past me, sat down, and started to swing. I speed walked to the gate, shut it, and started walking back in the forest. About 20 seconds later, I hear a loud,
Get the fuck back here!
And heard the gate spin open and running not far behind me. I practically shit my pants and start running as fast as I can. I somehow made it back to my house and locked the door without the man noticing where I went. I told my mom, practically in tears, and she called the police. The police searched around and came back a couple hours later with no one. That night, I was tossing and turning on my bed when I heard footsteps out in my street. I looked out my window to see the man looking through the windows of all the houses on my street. I started to shake as I grabbed the phone and called the police without even telling my parents. The cops showed up a few minutes later and caught the man. They didn't give us a whole lot of information, but a few days later, the cops called and told us the man had a mental illness and had been living in one of the abandoned houses for a couple of weeks. They also told us that he was planning on kidnapping me and doing God knows what to me. Hey everyone, this is my second post to Let's Not Meet, and as I mentioned in my last post, this wasn't the creepiest story that I have, so I've chosen the worst this time for you guys. It's like something directly out of a horror movie. The reality of horror movies is the psychopaths are real and not just fictional. Anyway, to the story. My dad, younger brother, and me, 14, went to the bush to camp. I live in Australia, and if you look up a place called One Tree Hill, I was a few miles/kilometers from there. We drove for a while until we found a clearing, and on the other side of the clearing was a dirt road that dipped down and then went uphill again. We set up camp on the edge of the clearing with our backs turned to the dirt road. We spent the whole day hiking around the area, and even ran into a small family on the way back, so it felt like a really safe area to be in. Eventually it was late in the afternoon, so my dad started up a roaring fire and we roasted marshmallows and drank Coke, telling silly stories until about 8 p.m. I say to Dad that I'm gonna go get some shut-eye, and then I go into the tent, and my little brother decides to sleep as well. After a little while, I realized I couldn't really get to sleep, so I get up and go back outside. My brother woke up and told me not to go, but I insisted I just needed some fresh air and that I'd be back in a minute. I went and sat a few meters from camp, looking at the dirt road and thinking about all the stuff we were doing tomorrow. The dirt road had pretty much all of the moonlight hitting it that night, and as soon as I noticed that, on the right side of the dirt path there was a shadow. So tall, so skinny, coming right for where we were. Our big fire was still going. My dad and brother were asleep. I didn't really think too much of it. It might just be another family or something. I rested against the tree and sat there for a while. I looked down the path again and the shadow was still there, but this time there was a person connected to it. All I could see was a silhouette from the distance between them and I. And the next thing the figure did sent an icy chill all over me. They started to dance. They were dancing like the best song they had ever heard just came on. It looked horrible because of how tall and slender they were. They danced closer and closer to the campsite. I was so frozen with fear that all I could do was silently cry. He danced all the way up to the fire and started warming his hands on it. He didn't see me yet, as I wasn't in the camp. I could see him better now with the light of the fire against him. He had brown, broken leather shoes, pants that were way too short for him, exposing his ankles, and a long brown coat with a cowboy hat. He was still dancing away while warming his hands, and then he flashes a glance at the tent my brother is in, and stands in front of it for what seems like an hour, just watching, waiting. I decided this was the time to go wake up my dad. I very quietly do a circle around the camp until I'm next to my dad's tent. Then I unzip it and slowly step inside. Little did I know, around the same time, the mysterious man entered my tent as well. I shook my dad awake and told him there was a man in our camp watching one of our tents. Dad perked up so fast and threw me his phone to call the police. He got out with a long wooden stick which we used to cook the marshmallows with and went into my brother's tent. "Hey, you fucking bastard, I know you're in there," screamed my dad, and the man let out a shrill scream and came bursting out of the tent. He took off down the dirt path. I was on the phone to the police in that area, and they heard that all in the background, and told me that help was on the way immediately. 2 cop cars pull up and assess the situation, and then escorted us back to the highway, and we all went home at 1 a.m. in the morning. We never went back to camping in that area. I was told they commenced a search during daylight, and one officer only found the hat that he was wearing, perched up high on a tree branch. I also just quickly wanted to share my brother's perspective of the situation. This is in his words from now on. "I was waiting up for you because I was scared, and then I saw the tent open, and it didn't look like you, but it was dark so I couldn't really tell. I asked for your name, and he said, which I remember in a ghastly voice,
'Nice to meet you. My name is Howard.'
And then he tipped his hat and began touching my ankle, and that's when Dad intervened. Ever since that night, my brother has an extreme trauma anytime he sees a cowboy hat, and he absolutely cannot speak to people named Howard. We have all not been camping since." It was 3:30 in the morning, and I was the only one still awake in our house, surfing the internet and etc. Now I'm sitting in one of our living rooms that's at the front of the house with floor and ceiling windows that look to our front lawn, and the wall that surrounds our house. The wall isn't really that high, and it was erected for aesthetic value rather than security. So I'm surfing the net, when suddenly the doorbell to the second gate rings. This gate is closest to where I'm located at, and I immediately get up and wander to said window and try to look and see who's at the gate. But it's dark, and we pretty much shut off all the lights by 1 in the morning, so I had no idea whoever it was ringing our doorbell. Oddly enough, nobody seemed to have woken up and answered it, so I took it upon myself to switch on the lights that are installed in the columns that flank the second gate, and walk outside to see who's at the gate. I'm surprised to find a woman I've never seen before standing there. She had ratty clothes on and disheveled hair, which made me a little nervous, but not enough to get back inside and lock the doors. I asked her what she wanted, and she says she's ringing us at 3 in the morning to sell us freaking boiled corn. It's a popular snack in our country, but not that popular. I must have stared dumbly at her for at least a minute before telling her I'm not interested, and that she should leave. But she kept insisting, telling me that her corn is sweet and delicious, and that I should give it a try. I grew frustrated and annoyed as I stood there freezing in front of our gate, arguing with this old weird lady. I suddenly just got fed up and stormed off back inside the house. She didn't ring the doorbell after that, and I thought she left. But halfway through my browsing again, I suddenly felt this little creep-out feeling, like somebody was watching me. I just instinctively glanced up from my laptop to find a face pressed flat on the window in front of me. I screamed and stared wide-eyed at the same woman before, as she locked eyes with me and started pounding on her window. And I mean pound like a crazy person, to the point that I think smears of blood were starting to appear on the window. We have strong bulletproof windows for some freaking reason. So yeah, I was scared shitless, and maybe just stare at her for a minute before bolting upstairs to my parents' room and waking them up. They came down with me, calling the police as we did, and then we arrived in the living room. The woman was still pounding at our window, now stained with blood from where her fist kept colliding with the glass. My father rushed back upstairs to get his gun, as my mother stayed on the phone talking to the police. At that point, the woman suddenly disappeared, only to reappear seconds later hefting a large stone from the landscape pieces in our garden, and started using it to bash the window open. She seriously looked like a rabid animal, complete with saliva dripping out of her mouth as she trained her eyes on me, while keeping at it trying to break our window open. Thankfully, the window held through all of her assault, and she never got the chance to break in. The police arrived minutes later and actually had to tackle her to the ground after she tried to bite and scratch any police officer trying to get near her. Turns out she was mentally ill, and actually a neighbor of ours. She was supposed to be on 24-hour watch by a private nurse, but she had knocked him out and escaped. My house wasn't even the first house she had rung and tried to sell her non-existent boiled sweet corn to, but apparently, I was the only one dumb enough to entertain her and actually gain her ire. Hey guys, Blue Spooky here. I just wanted to go ahead and thank you for watching the video, especially if you made it this far through the end. I I know this video is a little bit longer than normal, about 10 minutes so if you have any constructive criticism or any feedback, please feel free to leave a comment below. Also, feel free to like and subscribe if you want to stay updated with what the channel is doing. And if you have any stories that you want me to read or stories that you want to send in, please send them to bluespookyreadings@gmail.com, and check out my Facebook and Twitter. All of those links are in the description below. Thank you for watching once again, and hope you have a great day, guys. Thanks.